All right, I'm glad to welcome here three fixtures of various sorts on the Texas political scene right now, and I'll introduce them in order. To my immediate left, Jim Warren is a graduate of this university, an illustrious graduate of the government department, in fact. So we're happy to welcome him back to the College of Liberal Arts. He has worked for a wide range of people in Texas politics, including Jack Raines, Bill Clements, Pete Laney, who's been a guest here before, Bob Bullock, Buster Brown, and I think I cut him off. He was still naming names, so I suspect there's more. But has been a part of the lobby with a capital L since 1991. After a false start that quote unquote sucked during the 2005 legislative session, he started Billy Clyde's Political Hot Tub Party this past September, and that's a blog, not a regular activity. It was anonymous, more or less, and maybe he'll explain, why that was and why it didn't last very long. Next to Jim is Paul BURKA. We could say a lot about Paul. Paul joined the staff of Texas Monthly 1 year after the magazine's founding. He is the holder of a JD from the law school of this university and is a member of the State Bar of Texas. He spent 5 years as an attorney with the Texas legislature, where he served as counsel to the Senate Natural Resources Committee. He started blogging at Texas Monthly's BURKA blog, or is that BURKA's Texas Monthly blog? I kept playing with that. I couldn't figure out exactly how I wanted to do that.
I hate the name.
He
Pick something new.
Well, he started, well, maybe we'll do that before we're done today. That'll be the first question. What should Paul BURKA's blog be called? He started blogging at this site more or less 16 months after describing himself in print as, quote, stuck on the old fogey side of the media civil war between the MSM, which I appreciated as an abbreviation, and the bloggers, defending the idea that our expertise and credibility do make a difference and that our filters are now necessary to protect them. And so we'll also ask Paul why he started blogging. And then next to Paul is EILEEN Smith, who functions under the thin pseudonym, Pink Lady, and is editor-in-chief of In the Pink Texas and has a master's degree in journalism from Northwestern University.
So sad.
That was a sage nod. I like that. At one point, she worked as a staffer for Rob Janelle in the Texas House. She started In the Pink Texas in January 2005 for reasons that maybe she'll explain to us if she's explained them to herself fully, which I'm not sure is the case. So thanks all of you for coming. I guess what I sort of implied in all that is I'm kind of curious for everybody here, what made each of you start, since you all sort of started from such very different places? What made you start blogging, Jim?
It was a total lark. It was actually over the Christmas vacation last year, and a fairly high-ranking state staffer called me and said, "Have you read BURKA blog?" And I wasn't paying much attention. I said something along the lines of, "No, I hadn't been to Bookstop in a couple weeks," thinking it was some new novel out or so. "Oh, BURKA, I didn't know he had a blog." So I went on it and I started reading all this, and the speaker's race was the really hot deal. And it was so hyper serious on both sides, the left and the right and the pro and the con. And these have always been kind of low-key internal affairs, and it intrigued me, so I kind of launched this deal for two reasons. One, to see if I could launch a blog, because I'm not very computer savvy. And two, because I wanted to kind of put kind of a humor element on it, because I thought we needed to tone it down, ratchet down a little bit. And for some reason, people found it and read it, and I thought it would last about 2 weeks, and 6 months later, I'm still doing it, and I still don't really know why.
That's a lifetime in the blog world, really. How about you, Paul? I think very different reasons for you, right?
Oh yes, it wasn't. It was not an option. It was Evan Smith, our editor, called me in. And he said, "It's time to change your job description," and that's never a good beginning to a conversation. So I said, generally the thing to do in those situations is just to let them talk themselves out. Don't ask, there's a rule, don't ask a question to which you do not already know the answer. So I didn't ask anything, and he said, "I want you to start blogging." And so, as I said, it wasn't a choice, and it was not a choice I would have made. but it seemed to me at the time to be a demotion. I was executive editor of the magazine. I thought, well, you know, this year a blogger, next year a tin cup. And so I said I would do it. And Evan's initial idea was, he said, I want you to blog 6 times a day. My next thought was suicide. I just thought, and remember this was July, I mean, like when nothing was going on. So, but it had to be done. And so I think the hardest part was the technology was not that difficult to learn. I was surprised to find out. And because if it had been difficult, I would have probably not been able to do it. But the hard part, I think, for me, was finding the right voice. That at some point I could read my own work and thought, this reads just like it's in the magazine, and that's no good. So I started, you know, more first person, a little more opinionated, and eventually came with the idea that the way to cover the legislature is the way that ESPN does SportsCenter. You know, you just who's winning, who's losing, who fumbled, you know, who's done great, what are the top 10 plays. I mean, I don't specifically do that, but that's how I think you have to do it, because it is a sport. It's a great sport, and the teams change all the times, and you don't know what the uniform numbers are. So it was a slow start because July was a slow time, but then as things went on, there were a couple of Tom DeLay law cases. I got to go to New Orleans to watch a case in the Fifth Circuit, got to break that story of I knew how the case was going to come out from having heard the questions, and gradually once we got into the election and the speaker's race, to which I owe a great debt to you, because
Pay.
yeah, all right.
How much would that be?
What the payment you got is I didn't put your name in there, but there was all this talk about there's going to be this person running and that person running, and I fell for a lot of that stuff. And finally, I just wrote an item that said, I am tired of hearing about the speaker's race. I'm not writing another word about the speaker's race until some wannabe steps forward and says, I'm it. And about 5 minutes later, I got an email that said, the wannabe is Brian McCall, and he filed his papers to run on Friday, Jim Warren. And so the game was on. And I was able, I guess, to break that story. The papers have been filed. And it's one of the things about the blog is you never can be quite sure that you've broken the story. And in the second place, if you do break the story, nobody gives you any credit for it. The newspaper that finds it 2 days later will get the credit. But anyway, I said that Brian McCall, I called Brian. I called Brian and I said, Brian, I got this email. It says you filed your papers Friday to run. And I said, I'm not going to publish it if it's inaccurate. Because normally I publish all letters I get, but I'm not going to publish this if it's inaccurate. So if you tell me it's inaccurate, I won't publish it. Long pause. So I knew I had him. And so, you know, he said, I did publish it, but I wish you would hold off for a couple of days. It was the Friday before Christmas. He wanted that long weekend. And I said, can't do it. Brian, he said, the minute you make 2 phone calls, the whole state's going to know. So I like Brian. He's a friend. I'd much rather have had him be speaker than Tom Craddock, but this business is business. So I published that, and thanks to you for sending it. So. And from then on, it was kind of smooth sailing.
And you, Pink Lady?
Well, I'm the oldest blogger at this table.
You're the senior blogger.
I am, yeah. So I started it in 2005, and I was 32 when I started the blog, and now I'm going on 35. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a really, really sad thing for me. But basically, when I started it, it was just a platform for me to write. It was just kind of a creative outlet. And if anyone read it or was interested in it, you know, that was great. then there just started to become more and more interest, and I think in 2005 was really when the political blogs exploded around Texas. So it was good timing on my part. But yeah, in the Pinkabilta community around itself, and that's what I really like, is the interaction with readers. And Mr. Warren over there used to be one of my best commenters, and then he started his own blog. I used to learn a lot from what you said, including when you said there is no speaker's race. But
That was kind of a jab, but I believed it to be true, and it got a little out of hand. It got a little farther than I thought, but
So you told her there was no speaker's
Right.
race, and you told me there was one.
no, I said that there's a difference between being a candidate and a race.
Right.
But
anyway, and I also got more people that were interested in it to write for it, and one of my best writers is T.J. Schroet. He's over there. I was going to make him sit on this panel, but Jim told me I had to. So the speaker's race, actually, you kept saying there was no speaker's race, and I was kind of optimistic, thinking that there would be an actual race, and I was at a press conference that you were at, and it was kind of a press conference non-conference when Representative Pitts and McCall stood up there and said, "We have the votes for speaker, it's done," but they wouldn't release any names. And when Pitts was speaking, it was like, and I have great respect for Pitts, but it was like, down-home country bumpkin kind of talk. And McCall was just this polished, very outstanding speaker, and I just thought, why did they decide? Why is it Pitts and not McCall running? But I'm sure there were politics around that.
we haven't figured that out yet.
No.
The main qualification to be speaker is the inability to speak the English language. If you've never been around Billy Clayton or Gib Lewis or Pete Laney or Tom Craddock, you know.
There's my
yes,
answer.
good speakers do not make good speakers.
The speaker's race seems to have been kind of critical for all you guys, right? I mean, in different ways. It seems like it kind of got you going. And it seemed like your blog, Paul, kind of really, the buzz really kind of took off, it seemed to me, on your blog. People were reading it, but then all of a sudden, I think somebody mentioned you on the floor during the debate.
Yeah, I was in the gallery, and I felt like I was having a naked dream. Like everybody turns around and looks at you,
My eyes.
And then
it was, but I think it was something that changed so often every day. You could post 3 and 4 times a day, and one of the liberating things about being a blogger is that you don't have to be right all the time. You can say something and then something, no, now somebody else told me that's not right, and you have to be right some of the time, but not all the time. And so, it was trying to, again, cover the race in mid, as a sort of midway through as it was happening.
The freedom to be wrong.
Yeah. And you can pull them down and change it, and it goes away, and no one ever knows what was there. So it's.
I want to ask you guys something else, but since we're on the speaker's race, EILEEN, talk about your effort to live blog the vote.
Oh, yeah. Well, I thought for some crazy reason, that I'd be able to just get on the House floor, and not on the House floor, but in the chamber. And you couldn't get in. People had been waiting and getting tickets because everyone expected this big brawl on the floor. So instead, I snuck into this little extension, one of the hearing rooms, and watched it on the TV. And then my battery went dead, and I didn't have my extension cord. So then I went back to my office and was trying to pull it up online, but everybody else was pulling it up online. Finally, I got online, and but the readers in between those times were like, "Where are you? Why aren't you talking about the speaker's race?" Like I had just abandoned everything.
Well, that was the general impression, yes.
Well, thank you, Jim.
Well, that happened to me. It was the speaker's race was Tuesday, and so the weekend before there was a lot of activity. Well, there was a huge bridge tournament. She made fun of me because I'm a bridge player. So, and in fact, I wrote, I said, okay, you know, y'all, in fact, I just went to a bridge tournament, spent all day playing cards in a big bridge tournament. And I came back and I had all these emails. Where have you been? You know, what are you doing? Why, you know, have you stopped? Have you gotten, it was like, you don't have a life, you know? They own you. And
That was actually the next thing I wanted to ask you about. I mean, all of you have got interesting, I mean, you were talking about how you love your community.
Well, the big difference between, well, one of the big differences is that, you know, Paul's readers are holding him accountable, but he gets paid. You know, I mean, when readers are like, I can't believe she's taking another 3-day weekend, I'm like, I'm not getting paid to do this. This is a hobby.
Right.
You know, so it's I don't need, you know, I don't have to be
And
accountable.
you posted in a really amusing way about telling people to leave, basically leave you alone about posting.
You know, it's difficult enough to like to go from E2 to the 3rd floor or 4th floor proper because people want to grab you and talk to you about this and that, and it's almost kind of like getting mugged trying to get from the far end of the Capitol to the other end. But I'd get people stopping me, not saying, have you seen my amendment, or have you seen the committee substitute, or do you have a witness that's going to show up at this committee? It was, damn it, Jim, you hadn't posted anything in 3 or 4 days. What's wrong? We post something. It's like, well, I come up here at 7 in the morning and I leave at 10:30 or 11 at night. It's kind of, I don't get paid either, Eileen. So, and I suggested to my fans, if they were that interested in mindless entertainment, get a pet monkey.
Do you think it would be about the same?
No, I think the pet monkey would probably be more interesting.
It would post more anyway.
And probably was a better typist.
No, the pressure to be fresh, I think, really. I mean, I think that's why, you know, it's 6 months. You know, you're a veteran already. I mean, it's hard to keep it going. It's really hard. You know, I want to ask kind of, you know, one more thing that is a little more applicable to you guys and to Jim, although you probably have a view of this, is, you know, you guys both obviously in different ways come from journalism. How was that transition in terms of, you know, being the blogger and being the journalist?
Are they the same, Paul?
No, I mean, they're different. In fact, I would sometimes have, you know, even in the staff meetings, you know, like Evan went around the room once and said, okay, everybody tell what you're writing, what you're writing next. Got to me and I said, well, I used to be a writer, but, you know, now I'm a blogger. And I sort of feel that way. I mean, I feel like I'm slumming, but, you know, slumming is fun. And you know, you can write in first person when you feel like it. You can say, I don't get it when you feel like it. And it just, and I think it's liberating. But the other thing I try to do about the blog is I try to report. And so it's, you know, I'm a journalist in the sense of being a reporter. I spent, you know, I'm in the process of interviewing every senator right now. Patty Hart is my colleague, and you know, we spent an hour and a half with Senator Caroni yesterday about transportation, and we're gonna make the rounds of the senators. And I spent lunch with Justin Keener from the Speaker's office here, and a member and another staffer talking about how the Fruit case got settled. And so, you know, that's that much, to that extent, I guess I'm still a journalist, or maybe just nosy. And, you know, I've always wanted to know what's going on, and that's the main thing. I think whether you call it journalism or blogging or whatever, I think there are 2 qualities you have to have. One is you have to be curious as hell and really want to know what's going on, and then you really want to have to tell what you know. You have to have that inside of you, something there you want to get out. And so for me, I write at weird hours. I mean, I posted this morning at 5 something and 6 something. You know, got up, went in, had things to say. So I think of myself still as sort of barely in the journalism camp because I think reporting is what matters. You have to have the combination of reporting and attitude and, you know, and inside information and that sort of stuff.
And from the
Well, I'm a
slums? Are you from the
dancing monkey
slums?
in the slums. I don't think I got my master's in journalism thinking that I'd end up, you know, being a blogger. But it's, you know, when I did it, it was kind of like I just wanted to be funny. I wanted it to be, you know, I wanted to show the personalities of the legislators and not just, okay, here's a news story, here's a news story, here's a news story. And when Paul mentioned reporting, I mean, most blogs, except Paul's, don't do original reporting. They just kind of, you know, suck off of mainstream media and then write their opinions. But I think, you know, as more bloggers become almost virtual columnists, it's the way news is moving. It's almost like there is no breaking news anymore because there's this 24/7 news cycle. But I saw one of my colleagues from Northwestern, and I hadn't seen her in a while, but I was watching Meet the Press on Sunday a few weeks ago, and there she was. And she's with the New York Times, and she's on Meet the Press, and I'm like, I'm in Texas, and I'm a blogger. So, but you know, more and more, I think traditional journalism. I mean, every major daily, and now Texas Monthly, they have blogs. You know, because people kind of want that insider information.
But they don't. But the news, they don't know how to do it. You know?
They're learning.
They're learning. I mean,
Yeah.
they're so they don't. They're still sort of constrained by the newspaper
Right.
format. You know, that's what. If they learn, I mean, it's going to be really competitive. But
Well,
I
I'll
don't
tell
think
you where they're good, Paul, is sports. Sports bloggers at the Morning News, the Chronicle, the big papers, they're good at it. They've figured it out.
'cause
But
sports
politics
writing-
is lagging a little bit behind that.
Well, I mean, they have a job as reporters, and then they're supposed to be, you know, semi-cute, semi-funny in this blog. And if they say something about a legislator, they're going to see that legislator the next day on the floor, and
Right.
he or she probably won't talk to them.
They're going to see that shortstop in the
Well,
clubhouse the
little
next day, too.
Bruce Gibson told me when I started blogging, he said, you're going to ruin your credibility. First of all, I was grateful that he thought I had some. That was a step in the right direction. But you do, you know, you do have to write things about people that you're going to see the next day. Whereas at Texas Monthly, if the legislature's not in session and I write something about Rick Perry, I may not see him for, you know, weeks, months if I'm lucky.
He'll be mad at someone else by then. Well, I mean, it seems hard for me to imagine, though, the kind of things that, I mean, whether it's journalist or blogger doesn't really make any sense to me anymore. But it is certainly really hard for me to imagine anybody writing for the Dallas Morning News or even Texas Monthly and doing the kind of, you know, R-rated stuff that you two do in your blogs. Right. I mean, I just can't really imagine.
I'm kind of more, was it PG-13?
I don't know what movies you're watching these days. But.
Well, I have a couple rules, and I've violated my own rules a couple times. But I don't try to do anything that's personally, that I think that someone would be personally offended by. And I have violated my own rule once or twice, and I wish once you hit that send button, you can't get the damn thing back, you know? But I try not to use like EILEEN language, which is really bad.
That's only when TJ writes.
Oh, that's
I'm just the editor.
And you know, I don't want anything to be malicious or anything. I try to be kind of goofy, illustrative, make a point, hopefully make it funny, but you know, I don't want anyone to be mad about the deal.
Right. Well, I wasn't even thinking so much about Matt. It's just, you know, sometimes the tone of the humor is, you know, R-rated. We'll leave it at that, so I don't have to redact the
When
video.
Harry met Sally, the takeoff on Florence Shapiro and who?
Dewhurst.
Dewhurst. that was a classic.
All right. Well, that points us in the direction of what's going on right now. So, what's fun at the legislature right now? Y'all have been writing about it. What have you enjoyed the most in terms of fodder?
I think that, and this probably isn't really under the category of fodder, but I think that for the first time I guess the last 6 years plus, I've been amazed that the legislature has ceded traditional legislative authority to the executive branch, kind of without thinking about it. And that's a healthy tug that needs to go on there. And I think a lot of it has to do with there were so many freshman Republicans that got elected 6 years ago that they didn't really understand that that's supposed to be a natural give and take there. And now they're third termers, and a lot of them are chairmen, and they're saying, you know, what did we do? Let's get some of this back, or at least rebalance the deal.
Well, in that year, there was like a Republican monolith pretty much, although Dewhurst and Craddock were fighting. But I mean, the Republicans controlled everything. They made every decision. It was their agenda they were enacting, not the sort of, not the long-term public agenda of the state, but the pent-up agenda that Republicans had and were able to enact. And so you really, they didn't see any difference between the governor and the House. And so they invited the governor into budget negotiations, and I was appalled too. I wrote about that. No, I wasn't blogging then, but I was just appalled at it. And you know, finally, and that's to me the great story of the session is that the legislature has discovered it's an independent branch of government and challenged Perry. And
I think it was a political castration. Can I say that?
yeah.
Please do. Yeah.
Well, I mean, 2 executive orders both slammed down by the legislature. So, I mean, I thought they were definitely sending Perry a message.
Well, you know, your kind of explanation for that kind of makes sense to me, that you have a bunch of new people that don't go in, and at that point, party loyalty to other political allies is sort of developed, and there's no institutional sense or institutional loyalty, and that really only develops after being in the institution for a while, right? I think.
Well, you know, when I worked for Governor Clements, he asked the legislature for something called budget execution authority, which is law now, and they put all kind of restrictions on it and said the LBB had to approve it and everything, and that was considered a huge granting of executive authority just by doing that, even though there was major legislative oversight. Now they're just giving the governor $300 million and saying, this is your enterprise fund, do what you want. And executive orders don't mean anything. I mean, time of disasters or lowering the flag when someone important dies, but it's not appropriating money. Anyone who thinks this HPV deal,
Gardasil?
Yeah. Anyone who thinks that's a public health debate is wrong. That's a separation of powers debate. And if it was a public health debate, Jessica Farrar is a great legislator, Dennis Bonnet is, but he's a great insurance agent, she's a great architect. Those aren't the people you want debating your major public health issues. It's a separation of powers debate, pure and simple.
I think that was the hardest thing I've had to write, was trying to explain where I thought Perry was coming from on this. And I wrote that I thought that he was power hungry. And you can see if you just look at the executive branch, the insurance commissioner, former Rick Perry staffer, the PUC commissioner, former Rick Perry staffer. You just look all through state government, and all of the people he's appointed are his staffers. Former staffers, they're all out there, so that he can run those agencies and basically bypass the legislative oversight, tell them what to do. And I wanted to get into psychobabble on it. I really did. But because I'll give it to you all, but my theory is that Perry is somebody who has no respect from the populace at large and never has had any. And so his answer is to try to sort of compensate for it by amassing more power. And by God, I'm the guy. And so it was hard to write. I'm not sure I did a very good job of it, because I knew there was a line I shouldn't cross, but I never found it.
Well, let me tell you, Ann Richards actually started that by wanting to have the executive directors and name the chairman, and Sunset gave her that slowly. And I think the job of a governor, head of the executive branch, if you're going to get blamed for everything, you ought to have a little control over government. I don't blame him for that, but I guess the thing that disappointed me is the legislature didn't fight back for 6 years. Yeah, you know, both sides ought to try to take power away from each other. That's healthy, and the judicial branch too. And it was a one-way street. Perry got his way for 6 years, and now he's surprised that there's a backlash. Well, duh.
Yeah, that's.
What have you written the most about?
Oh, I did write a lot about HPV. Just because, you know, on one hand it was like, oh, this is a good idea. How can it not be a good idea, you know, preventing cervical cancer? And then you get into the politics of it, and Mike Toomey's the main lobbyist, and I think it was, I forget who, Gardasil, which is the vaccine they were going to use, is from Merck. And GlaxoSmithKline had the exact same vaccine in the pipeline. And Toomey was representing Merck, and it just seemed like, you know, I mean, it's power again, what Paul was talking about. But I think what I probably wrote the most about was some of Leo Berman's fine immigration legislation. He basically wants to deport all Hispanics.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's a good, I mean, early in the session, before things start to die off, there's always a lot to write about, right? Because, you know, who knows what's going to make it and not make it.
You know, that's an interesting issue about the immigration deal, and I think one of the things that hadn't been covered by the MSM, as they say, is there's a big division in the conservative community between kind of the social conservatives, that's not really the right word, and the business conservatives. Because if you want to run the housing and overall construction and the restaurant and a lot of the small business, and I mean, I don't see these guys who are the Leo Bermans of the world who want to clean their own gutters and replace their own roofs, and they're even out mowing their yards in Tyler on Sunday afternoons. These people provide a very valuable service and at a cheap cost. But there's, for some reason, the Dan Patricks of the world have this idea that this is going to ruin our society for some reason. Even though the Comptroller's Office had said it's a 17-point-something billion benefit to the Texas economy, they're convinced that somehow we're breaking their local hospital authorities or something, which is demonstrably not true. And I don't get it. I really don't.
Well, it's like the Farmers Branch Ordinance. I mean, it was like it just came out of nowhere, and I think it's just fear-based.
I wrote a column about it in the old, the old mode in the magazine, and that's how I started. It was, I don't get it. I thought we decided on this back in when we had an immigration bill under Reagan, we had an amnesty, we decided what we were going to do. And this is a really strange issue because in politics, there are almost all issues come from either just the bureaucracy. If you go to the LBJ school, when you study policy development, what they'll tell you is most of the issues come from indicators. These little bureaucrats in green eye shades studying, what the climate is, or what the income level is, and then they see these problems and then they try to address them. And or they come from an election when someone either the government changes hands or someone is run on a platform. They almost never start from the grassroots and bubble up. I mean, that just doesn't happen. And immigration did that. It was the politicians would never, ever have gotten on this issue. They had no choice. And because you have people like Leo who are just nutty on the subject. I haven't looked this up, but I was at dinner the other night and some Republicans were talking about this. And apparently Linda Harper Brown has a bill that if there's a traffic stop and that you find there's an illegal alien in the car and she's pregnant, she must be deported immediately so that she can't give birth on American soil and have a citizen.
I think they're sending illegal babies over in like Moses baskets back to Mexico.
And then there was and if they aren't sure whether they're pregnant or not, they can give them a pregnancy test, which gives a whole new definition to the word spreadum.
Now see, that's bad language that he uses.
Yeah, but it's not on the blog. That's only from Paul BURKA Live.
But this is just crazy stuff.
Stand up.
That's excellent. Okay, well, I think we've touched on this. I want to open it up for questions, but let's give you a chance. Who's like giving you the best stories in the legislature so far? Who do you rate highly, both in terms of seriously doing good work and maybe only semi-seriously giving you things to write about?
You know, my opinion, there's always a group of workhorses and show horses, and then there's, as his magazine calls them, furniture, which I don't think there's anything wrong with furniture. There's a place for that.
If you know your furniture and act like it.
And maybe there's just one little bitty deal that you're good at in one committee, and you're kind of the rent-to-own guy, or whatever, you know. That's fine.
But if you're noisy furniture, that's
bad.
That's bad.
Yeah. But you know, it's the people that you would expect. It's the folks who know how to get together, majorities or super majorities. The Senate's real interesting because the Senate has basically become, in my opinion, almost operating on a unanimous consent basis. Just because they have to. There's no way they can deal with all that. The Senate had their most productive day, floor day, as far as non-uncontested calendar days today, and they passed 14 or 15 bills. And, you know, it's April, whatever today is, April 11th or 12th. And
3 yesterday, wasn't it?
yeah, it was 3 yesterday. So, you know, hell, get on a roll. It might be 20 before the week's over. But they've had so much to do. And there's a lot of talent in the Senate, but it's a lot of talent that it's not like, you know, a Farabee or a Monfort or an Ike Harris or these guys that have been up here for 25 years and it's Brymer and Averett and Duncan and Ogden, and there are even a lot of new senators. I looked around today. I just happened to be going through the gallery. I saw Kirk Watson and Glenn Hager debating something, not debating, like disagreeing, but two very bright guys. They're going to be stars of the Senate if they hang around, but they're not those old bulls like when I first came up here, and BURKA came up here when I was in kindergarten, so, you know.
Yeah, I worked for Babe Schwartz.
Yeah, I know.
That was probably not a person who
I
ever
worked
heard
for
of
the
it.
guy who beat Babe
You worked
Schwartz.
for Buster, right? Right.
So what do you think, Paul?
Well, there are people who, if Eileen weren't here, I would say this with more confidence, but she's going to write about how crazy I am. And maybe she's right. But I think Warren Chisholm has been remarkable in this weird way. I mean, you know, I'm telling Evan, you know, Evan's wife is on the board of Planned Parenthood. Evan is you know, comes from New York. He's pretty liberal, but he understands the other side too. I mean, Evan's an incredible editor, but you know, the words Warren Chisholm will send him into a foaming, you know, rage. So Chisholm Chairman of House Appropriations. So he wants to know, give me a preliminary best list. And so I said, well, I've got some names. There aren't that many. This is the House. You know, I'm not overloaded with bests. But, you know, I gave him a couple of names. I said, then there's Chisholm. I said, I think he's been a really, really good Chairman of Appropriations. And he said he just has a great sense of the tides of the House. He's just veteran. He knows what the kinds of people you're talking about. They're not bulls in the House, but they're sort of senior guys who sort of know when it's time to do something, when it's not time to do something, to respect the institution. And I told him a couple of stories. So I'm getting ready to leave the house the next morning, and he calls me up and he says, "Do you know what your Warren Chisholm has done?" And so, he's introduced a bill for mandatory Bible classes in Texas, and the abortion trigger bill. And so, don't give him to me on the best list. So, what am I going to do? So later that day, I'm at the Capitol, and it's getting pretty late. It's about 9:30, and I run into Scott Hochberg, who's on the Education Committee, and they've just heard the Bible bill debate. Scott talks about it a little while, and I said, well, what am I going to do with Chisholm, And he said, well, let me tell you about Chisholm. Yeah, he's got these crazy bills, but he said, during the appropriations debate, right after the Democrats tacked an amendment on for a pay raise, taking the money out of the Republican idea of merit raise and into the more education community popular across the board pay raises. He said, I had the next two amendments. And he said, I was scared to walk up there. And he said, I got up to the front and said to Warren, I've got the next two amendments, and if you want me to take them down, I will. And he said, no. He said, I'll just accept them, no problem. So that was the first surprise. And then the next thing was, he said that, Scott said, who's a great legislator, Scott said to Chisholm, he said, I see you all are out working the floor trying to reverse that vote, trying to reconsider the vote on the pay raise. He said, I hope you don't do it because it will really blow things up. And Warren said, they're trying to reconsider it. They just don't know that they're not going to do it yet. And that's what makes a great legislator, right there. He knew what had to be done. You see, I am nuts, aren't I? I know you're thinking that, right? Right. So anyway.
You'll be able to see that facial expression in the video later.
So to me, I think Chisholm's the biggest surprise to me because it's you can be a good appropriations chairman just by keeping a lot of people happy. But the meeting I had at lunch with Justin and his friends, or his people he got together, Justin told me that Chisholm, a couple of weeks out, called the exact dollar amount the plaintiffs would settle for, almost to the dollar, he said. So, you've got to. The guy has never been to college, and yet he has an ability that's unique to the House of Representatives. So.
But we do support going to college.
Yes, we do.
Eileen?
I think the anti-immigration stuff was fun to follow. Fun in a way that it was like kooky. When you talked about the abortion trigger bill, so that was one of the Senator Dan Patrick's, that was one of his big things in his campaign. And I don't even know where Dan Patrick's from, so I always just put in parentheses R, Crazy Town. But he's been interesting to watch because he's just ineffective. All he is a show horse, like you were saying. But you didn't say he was a show horse, but there are show horses.
I've been trying to get you right about him for a year ago. Remember, I used to lobby you. I said, write about Dan Patrick.
Did you?
Hell, I actually sent him an email saying, can I do something in Texas Monthly about Dan Patrick?
I just wrote about him walking off the floor when the Muslim cleric was saying the prayer.
He's given up on you. He's not reading anymore.
I did pass that on, and that was part of the genesis of Mimi's story,
right,
which was a good story.
It was.
My big disappointment was when there were all those rumors that I think I was the only one who believed that Rick Perry could be considered for the VP spot. And I just thought, God, that would be so awesome. Just to imagine that someone else from the governor's mansion would be on a national ticket. And then when Mitt Romney announced, I thought, that would be great because they look exactly alike. And I just imagined them standing together at conferences and stuff. But it was never to be.
You know what would happen?
No.
You know how lucky Perry is? Mitt Romney would go out on the inauguration day. He would forget his hat like William Henry Harrison. He'd be dead in a month. And Rick Perry would be president of the United States.
On that note, I think we're going to open it up to questions. So if you'll let Sean come around. If you have a question, raise your hand and give Sean a minute to come. Please, have at it. Over here. And while we're waiting for the mic, thanks very much. That was enormously fun.
One of the big questions or problems with blogging in general, and indeed in a way with the internet as a whole, is the question of filters or verification or vetting of information. And some people seem to think that the old John Stuart Mill marketplace of ideas will take care of that somehow. But we see all sorts of instances of real damage being done by people taking blogs seriously and linking to things before anybody's really checked on things. And I wonder what each of you thinks about that, the scale of that problem, and whether you have any good ideas about how to try to deal with it.
Well, I've frequently said that my site is what we call the no research zone. And I think the last thing I wrote something very authoritatively and then said in parentheses, and I know this because I can remember someone told me this a long time ago and I vaguely remember it. So that's kind of the way I vet my stuff. So if you're writing your master's thesis, don't use me as a primary source.
Paul?
Well, I have to say that a lot of the time I spend, if I'm going to quote somebody, I look it up on the legislative archives. I mean, I want to try to get that right. Now, if I live, I live blogged, as they say, the appropriations bill, all the key amendments, and wrote about them. And I didn't try to go back and check all those quotes, but I did write them down and try to get everything as it went through. So I do think it's important to get stuff right. But there's also been, in terms of the self-correcting idea of the blog, one of the things I did was that we were sent a letter at Texas Monthly that the SMU faculty at the Perkins School of Theology was circulating against the Bush Library. And so I got that letter, and I broke the story nationwide. Not that anybody else, but you all know it, because there's no credit for it. But and then it was put up on HuffingtonPost.com. That story was taken there. Tons of comments there and on Texas Monthly. Many allegations about Bush's executive order and limiting access to the presidency and presidential papers and what it did. Well, about halfway through the first day, I got an extremely long and lucid letter from an archivist that laid out exactly what the rules were, what the problems were with Bush's order, the things that weren't the problems. It was amazing. It was amazing. It was so good that I not only published it, but I took it out of there and did an independent post on it so that readers would be sure to see it, because I don't know how many people actually read the comments. But that, to me, was a good example. And then the other one that was really weird was that when I was writing about Perry, who was clearly going to be a minority governor. He was going to be the plurality governor, not a majority governor. So I looked up to see who the governor was who was the closest, and it was Elijah Pease. And so I wrote a little piece about Elijah Pease and what he had been like, and I took it from the Handbook of Texas, and I said, this is what the Handbook of Texas had to say about Elijah Pease. And 10 minutes later, there is a posting from the guy who wrote the article in the Handbook of Texas. What does he do all day? Go out and Google Elijah Pease? I couldn't believe it. So anyway, it is an amazing medium, and the people that you never know who you're reaching out there. And I do think that people, just like when I said I'm not writing about the speaker's race anymore until there's a candidate, and within 10 minutes, Jim had sent that message in that there is a candidate.
Do you think the blog really helped sort of moved you along in thinking about that? Because I mean, I sort of quoted your, you famously kind of
Right.
quoted, your sort of article in Texas Monthly saying,
Which Evan hated.
Right, Evan, yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
In March of 2005.
You do?
In March of, I think, yeah, anyway.
Right.
In March of 2005, Paul kind of wrote a column saying, after the Dan Rather thing, being very skeptical about blogs and defending, in a sense, the filters that are in mainstream media practice. So do you think that actually doing the blog not made you change your mind, but added more depth to the way you think about this?
Well, yeah, I think just those experiences that the people who are reading them and comment, and there have been others where experts write in and really know. They really know things. I've gotten a letter from a lobbyist who had a child in TYC and wrote about what it was really like as a parent dealing with TYC. And that was really incredible to have that. So I am amazed and incredibly respectful of how the blog transmits information. On the other hand, there is obviously a lot of garbage that comes out. But if you read the blogs about Texas politics, which I don't read them all every day, but I try to keep up with them. There are some that there are none that I read that are just plain things that are just plain wrong. And they all shed a lot of light on them. You can find a lot just by going down the list of those items. I mean, Bernard's report. Anybody hear from Bernard's report? Those are young guys and women, but they're good.
It's got a second generation too, and the second generation.
Yeah. They break some stories. So I think it's pretty good. I still think there's no substitute if you're going to cover it the way I want to cover it for reporting. You've got to report. I mean, I'm in the middle of a story now about in a fight with Dewhurst, who called me yesterday. I had said there was going to be that there's a rebellion in the Senate against Dewhurst on the.
I heard that this morning.
Yeah.
They're trying to round up 11.
Yeah, and on the appropriations bill, and I had it a week ago. I wrote something about a week ago after talking to some Republican senators. There's one Republican senator that I didn't used to like him, and he didn't used to like me, but he decided he had to have somebody to talk to get this stuff out, and now we are best friends. And so, but so I said, I wrote about this. Dewhurst is in trouble. He's got all these problems, and the budget bill may get out because of how he's handling things and who he's put on probably who he's putting on the conference committee. So I got a call from Dewhurst yesterday. Will you hold, please, for the lieutenant governor? And so Dewhurst says, the bill had just gotten out of committee. See, he's so chicken. He didn't call me before and say you're wrong. He waited till he got the bill out on a 15-0 vote. And he called me and he said, well, I sure want to thank you, Paul. He said, you wrote how the bill was in trouble. And all of a sudden, he said, senators were coming into me and promising their vote. And now I got it out 15-0. He said, I just want to thank you. And I said, Governor, I am happy to serve. Call on me anytime you need more votes. I'll do whatever I can to help you. And of course, we're all just gritted teeth, but this is how we're doing. So today, I got up and the first thing I posted was, don't be fooled. Yes, the bill's out of committee, but that is not a settled issue. Those senators are still working. They think they can get 11 votes to beat the bill. And I said, this is not rumor. I don't print rumors. Well, hardly ever. And what never? Well, hardly ever. And so said this is not rumor. This is based on conversations with senators. It's a real deal. It's serious. So, that's kind of I think you have to be able to do that if you're going to try to break news in a blog, which is one of the things I want to be able to do.
Ms. Smith?
Wow. Do I have to follow Paul?
Yeah. Just talk about what the lieutenant governor said to you when he called you this morning.
if you've read my blog before, it's irreverent, and to your question, I can't afford a team of researchers or fact checkers, so I kind of just write things, and if they're true, that's good. No, I actually don't. I mean, I write things based on news stories, but I throw in my own things, but they are usually, if I'm adding a joke to a quote that someone said, it's obvious that they didn't really say that. People can see it as parody. Like this morning I wrote about a bill by Charlie Howard, all about, kids in public school being persecuted, because of their faith, and how we have to reintroduce the faith, and he has legislation on it. And so I said, that he periodically sports, oh no, now I'm forgetting the name, stigmata on his hands and feet. So people probably know that's not true.
Except on his staff.
Right. But, I mean, he might have gone, checked his hands. So there's, I can poke fun at legislators or poke fun at some stories, but people know that that's kind of my voice. And so, readers can expect that. And another thing about blogs in general is that if you do have a community, if you write something false in a post, people will tell you in the comments that's not true, people that are, on the opposing side. And so there's that kind of balance.
You publish everything you get, every comment?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I do too.
We have a question over here.
Paul, you had a quote earlier in the panel. You said, bloggers, you have to be right some of the time, but not all of the time. And I have a question. My question is, should journalists who are blogging have to follow the same journalistic standards that they would for print as they do for blogging? And in light of the fact that journalists receive many protections that a regular blogger wouldn't, whether it's constitutional, case law, statute, et cetera. Because I'm seeing a lot of, I've even had this conversation with several reporters where they'll put something up and they're like, well, we didn't ask the other side, but we thought we'd ask for the other side's opinion later. And it's like, then it comes into question, well, do you follow the same standards you normally would that your paper or news outlet would require for regular reporting? And I'd like everybody's, I see it as two different categories: journalists who blog and citizen bloggers.
Well, for me, I guess I am pretty well aware of things will come in to be, things will be sent to me by email that set off my, my antenna go up. I was sent some stuff about the guy who is now running the state school, the TYC, Ed Owens. Ed Owen. Ed Owen.
Owens,
Owen.
with an S.
Owens, okay.
His mother was my high school biology teacher. So.
Oh, okay, okay. And it alleged that he had been a defendant in a lawsuit while he was at TDCJ, the Department of Corrections, sexual harassment lawsuit, and had covered it up. They had documentation for it. They spelled the guy's name wrong. Whatever the right way is, they spelled it wrong. And even though it had documentation, I never used it, because if by chance it happened, there was an Ed Owen or an Ed Owens there, whatever the wrong spelling was. It's a blog on the Texas Monthly website, and if Eileen gets sued, her massive holdings and trust fund might be endangered. But for me, it's Texas Monthly, and so I have to be pretty careful and aware of libel and things like that before I write. That's probably the biggest thing different between me and just an ordinary blogger, is that doing it on the Texas Monthly website. I don't run it by the lawyers, but
you don't go through the fact checkers either, do you, for the blog? Right?
No fact checkers. Wonderful.
Which is interesting.
No fact checkers. No fact checkers. No copy editors. They can't stop me from putting a % sign instead of writing the damn thing out. So that sort of thing is really good. But But Evan does look at it, and if he has a problem with it, we have an agreement that he can go in and change it, which he's my boss. He ought to have that right. So.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but if you didn't know that, I think that my site's pretty much protected by parody, and that these are public figures. So, you know, if someone, I have been threatened by lawsuits, but I'm like, what are you going to take? My website, you know, my domain name? So usually when someone, you know, emails me and says, but I never said that quote, I never said I have stigmata. You know, it's like I can say, you know, this is a parody. It's like Jon Stewart Show is a parody. I mean, you can't really, and you know, I really haven't heard of many lawsuits successful against blogs. It's just, I just don't know how they would do it. I mean, I'm sure in time there will be.
Do you wish you enjoyed more legal protection?
Boy, I'm about as judgment-proof as you can get, so get after it, big boys. No, actually, nothing I write. Like I said, I try to write nothing. I don't come from the right or the left. I do a goofy little intro usually. I try to make a point. I try to make it kind of humorous, and it's kind of iffy whether that ever happens or not, and kind of close it up and, you know, get people. Really, you almost have to be a legislative insider to really get a lot of what I say. So I write for an audience of, you know, maybe 1,000 people, and best I can tell, only about, you know, maybe 500 or 750 ever look at it. So I mean, it's more like a club than a real, and like one of their blogs where they have millions of people that look at it every day.
Worldwide.
I think the worst that most I ever had during the speakers race was 5,000 in a day, and they were real happy with that.
Huh.
But for the most part, you know, I don't know. At the beginning, I didn't know if anybody read it because, you know, I've been writing it for a month and nobody called to say I've seen it or anything. So
That's why I had to go to the bookstore when someone said, "Have you read BURKA blog?" Thought it was the new novel by
We had
the
another
merchant.
right over here. I think you should identify yourself as a reporter, probably.
I'm a web producer for CBS 42 here in Austin, and my question is kind of a mainstream media question. Certainly the blogs have some way of making money. I mean, my question is, do you track all of your uniques and page visits, and how do you translate that into funding, or are you even involved in that side of the business at all?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Right. Blank looks from the panelists ensued.
Somebody does it. I'm not. I don't. And I have no idea if I'm judged on that. I can tell you that my job description changed, but my pay did not. So, you know, but if you like to write, you know, I mean, what more could you ask for? So,
Money.
Money?
In answer to your question, some bloggers do Google ads or they do blog ads, and I think they can make like $10 every 3 months from that. So I don't like the way it looks, and I just, you know, I didn't ever want to take political ads, so I don't make any money off my blog. If anyone wants to pay me.
I don't see, when you, well, you don't have this, I don't see on my, what I see is what I post on. So I don't see any ads.
No, you wouldn't have any ads on yours.
Oh, no. I was told the other day that TXU is running ads big time on our blog.
Seems kind
Whether
of
it's
like
a good TXU or the bad TXU, I don't know where if there is.
Want to split it with me?
Other questions? Somebody else have a question in the back, I thought? Yeah, Axel?
Oh, thank you. This is directed to whomever. What are your views on the future of blogs? Is there anything you would like to see accomplished through their potential?
Big question.
Way above my pay grade. I don't know. like I said, I started this on a lark, and I just write some stuff. It takes me 20 minutes. I hit send. If people look at it, they look at it. I don't really know. If you're looking for a futurist, I'm not your guy.
I think that, obviously blogs and online media is not going anywhere. And I just see mainstream media and blogs as continuing to evolve to the point where they're, like blogs are on the mainstream media sites, and it all kind of joins together. That's what I see, but I don't know what Paul sees. Future of blogging?
Well, we live in an era when everybody wants to be a star and everybody wants his or her opinion heard. And I think that means that, the technology may change and no doubt will, and will get better, and what we're doing now will be seen as primitive. But I can't imagine that there would be less of this, or that that it will be. You just have to know what's not very good, and and what is. But sometimes I just go around I'll go to Midland and just try to figure out what the Midland blogs are, see if anybody has anything to say about Craddock. Sorry.
There are Midland blogs?
There was jessicaswell.com.
Very well done.
It is well
It's
done.
one of the few I actually read.
Me too. Me too. There was a Brownwood blog that had, it's called Brownwood blog, that had stories by TXU, but TYC, same difference. By employees and what it was like to work at those places. So that's really, I published a couple of them. So I just think it's inevitable that it will, in fact, I think it's more interesting, how are the MSM going to compete with this? I don't think in the years since I've been doing this, I don't think that they're even close to figuring it out. Do you? I just don't, they don't even know what to do.
Well, it's a moving target. They figure something out a little bit, and then something else has changed already, I think.
Yeah, but I think you'll see a lot more of virtual columnists. And I just, I really, like Paul said, everybody wants their opinion out there. Everyone wants their voice heard. And I feel like there's going to be less straight news stories. And, people talk about blogging and credibility and how they don't have any. But, when the first newspapers started out, they were all just gossip rags. And then, there was the evolution of, okay, here's something I can take seriously. So I see, I don't even know how many blogs there are today, but I think it's slowing down, and it will kind of the more credible blogs. Most blogs last like 3 months and then the person shuts it down. So.
It's hard to keep it going.
Mm-hmm. I think, I'm dreading May 28th. What am I going to write about on May 29th? That's when the legislature goes home,
And Evan's still expecting 6 posts a day.
Well, Evan expects 10 best, 10 worst to make its deadline, so I know what I'm going to be writing on May 29th. But on June 10th, he's going to want to know why I haven't written anything in 2 weeks. But there's a huge difference between Eileen's blog and my blog. Everybody reads her blog. Everybody doesn't read my blog. There was during the governor's race, Eileen got a hold of, was the first, I think, to get a hold of the Kinky Friedman tapes.
No.
You weren't the first?
That was Burnt Orange.
Burnt Orange got
Yeah.
it? Well, all I know is that I read it on hers, the Kinky Friedman's things, or heard it, and it was incredible. And I wrote a blog that said, whatever you're doing, stop reading my blog and go immediately to her blog.
This was a different post. It was a Kinky Friedman post, and there were about like 200 comments of people just screaming at each other and screaming at me. I was called miserable and psycho, and yeah. So
No,
I remember when you did that.
It was incredible, and I've never had. I'm lucky if I get into double figures in comments on a blog. I'm lucky, the Bush Library is the one that got the most, and it was like I got 3 today on the Bush Library. And it was from December the 12th. But, you know, people read Eileen for entertainment and insight into people. She has this Charlie Howard thing, she just has a dead eye for people, and so they read it. Everybody reads it to be entertained. They may look at the headline of mine and move on. I mean, I had lunch today with John Davis, remember? Justin brought John Davis along, and he said, I don't read the blog. I don't read any blogs. He's a member of the legislature. So, you know, what am I supposed to say? Well, I'll get you tomorrow.
He reads mine because he sent me a note the other day thanking me for something I said on his.
No.
So.
Other questions? Well, it's getting late in the afternoon. I'm going to thank you all, but especially Jim Warren, Paul BURKA, EILEEN Smith.